So, hello everyone, I'm Tanvi Bansal, Marketing and Retail Head of the Women in Business Club at Miranda House.
And I'm Palak. I'm the junior executive at marketing team in WIB Women in Business Club Miranda House.
So, Women in Business Club is not just a college society, it's a student-led platform focused on exploring the dynamic, dynamic world of business and marketing. But enough about us today. Today we have Mr. Chetan Kapoor with us. He's the Chief Executive Officer at Tech Mahindra Foundation. With more than 2 decades of experience in development sector, Mr. Kapoor has played a significant role in advancing education and skill development initiatives across India. Through his work, he has consistently focused on strengthening the connection between education and employability. We are truly delighted to have you with us.
Thank
Over
you
to
so
you.
much, Tanvi. Thank you.
Sir, thank you for joining us today. So to begin with, could you please just tell a little about your journey, like what first drew you towards working in the social sector?
Yeah, thank you, Palak. Thanks, Tanvi, and thank you for inviting me at this forum to speak about my journey. And I do hope that people who are listening to this will hopefully find some value in what I have to share. So it's been a terrific journey in the social sector. It's been exactly 25 years, by the way, because it was in March 2001, exactly 25 years ago, when I first stepped into the sector. But the run up to that was quite interesting because I um, did my MBA from the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, which was in 1995. And at that time, like many of my other peers, I was quite clear that I would want to work in the corporate sector and I would want to move up the corporate ladder, like many of us. Which is exactly what I did to begin with. So I did join a large Indian company. I was in the international business division of that company, which gave me the opportunity to travel abroad a little bit, live the life that you do after you do an MBA from a premier institute. But very soon for me, some existential questions started creeping up in terms of what is it that I really would want to do in life. I think it's important for youngsters, at that age, say when they're about 25 years of age, which is what I was at that time, to ask yourself this question very clearly, because it's not just about, of course, you have to earn enough to take care of yourself, but and your family, but it's also about what is it that you as an individual genuinely want out of life. How do you as an individual define success, which is the question that I ask myself. What does success really mean for me, right? And somewhere, I don't know from where, the answer came that success would for me would mean being at a position or having the opportunity to help and support in a positive way the lives of others. So that was the deep question, the answer that I got from within. And the next few years, I left that job. Initially, of course, it was for more mundane reasons of helping out my father in his business, but I could also sense that there was within me an increasing need to look for something which was more purposeful in life. Back then, we did not have internet like the way that we have now. I did not have much information about what the social sector is all about. And at a time in the year around 2000 2001, when I was really at a crossroads, I was almost 30 years of age, still not very sure of what I wanted to do in life. I chanced upon an opportunity to start an NGO. So a couple who had just come back from the US, they wanted to work in the field of children with developmental disabilities. And they were looking for somebody who could take this from a two-page concept note to fruition. I met them, liked their vision, and most importantly, for me, I would want to narrate this episode that happened, around that time when in in Bombay, I visited the Spastic Society of Bombay, along with Dr. Vibha Krishnamurthy, who was, the one of the two people who had who wanted to set up this organization. And what I saw, in the 3-4 hours that I spent over there was almost life changing, because I could see that, the elusive purpose that I was looking for in life, I could see it there. And that's what really helped me with conviction to take the decision to, just get into it. And that was how my journey began of working in the social development sector. I think I was extremely fortunate that as the first step in that direction, I was asked to set up an NGO from the scratch, which ensured that I went steeply up the learning curve to just understand how an organization in the non-profit world really functions. So that was what got me in. I think uh, a deep need to question yourself at the right time in terms of what is it that you would really want to do in your life. How would you want to really spend, not the months and the years, but how would you really want to spend the minutes and the hours, which would make things more meaningful for you.
That's really insightful, sir. So, sir, during when you were answering, you mentioned that you have completed your education at India Institute of Foreign Trade. So, looking back to your college days, were there any experiences or decisions that played a role in shaping the path of your career that you eventually took?
Yes, thanks for that question, Palak. In fact, it was not just at college, but even well before that. When I look back at my life, the childhood that I spent, I was, of course, privileged and fortunate to have, come from a family where we really did not have, too much of a challenge. But in the community, I grew up in Patna, and in the city, in the area locality that I grew up in, I could, even at that age, feel that there is a lot of disparity, there is a lot of inequality in the way that our society is structured. And even as a child, I remember that used to bother me, because I can again give you a very specific instance, which is that um, back then, the person who used to come to our home to do the cleaning, and especially cleaning the washrooms, was, as you know, in the past, we've had in our country a time when a certain segment of people were considered to be untouchables, who Mahatma Gandhi had called Harijans, right? So this person belonged to that community, and I could see that he used to really avoid any kind of contact with us because of the background that he came. And once I remember, accidentally, I was a kid and I kind of touched him, and he was horrified that I had touched him. So it just led me to think that why should this be so, right? So I think these are some instances that you face early on in your life, which somewhere stay within you, and I would say even subconsciously influence you in terms of the kind of decisions that you would make later.
Yes, sir. It was such a beautiful story that you narrated, sir. So, sir, your journey includes working with like several organizations and even founding your own consulting initiative before leading the foundation as well. So, how did those experiences shape the way you think about the social impact today?
Yeah, that's a fairly broad sweeping question, Palak. There have been many, many, experiences, episodes, and I don't know where exactly to start. But I think early on, probably if there is one organization which has had a very, very strong influence on my own thinking, on my own understanding of the social sector, it would be Pratham, which is where I spent about 3.5 years at the very beginning of my journey. And why I count that to be most influential is that that was a time where my own understanding was really being built about what the sector is all about, particularly the education sector, which probably fascinated me more than anything else. Somewhere probably it goes back to the to the fact that, my mother had been a teacher all her life, so I'd seen her very closely, and also our own lived experiences within classrooms were such where, a lot is to be desired. We know that classrooms are often not optimal in the way that they function, whether it is the capacity of the teachers, whether it is the curriculum that's there, whether it's the just the sometimes the infrastructure and things like that. So obviously, to work in education was a very strong intention there. And in Pratham, I was fortunate because I got the chance to look at classrooms in India up close, especially those which are in government schools, especially those which are for those who are not as fortunate as many of us, and began to understand the ground realities very clearly. Now, one of the things which I've often spoken about in my journey and which I continue to hold very strongly is that if you want to really work in the sector, you have to first scale deep before you think of scaling wide. What that means is that if you were to start your NGO and work in any theme, it could be education, it could be healthcare, it could be livelihoods, or whatever, right? You would want to work in a way where you can maximize your impact, where you can reach out to as many individuals, improve as many lives as you can, right? That's just a very logical sort of an ambition to have, right? But what that means is that you would aim at spreading whatever that you're doing today in one place to other geographies, getting more out there to amplify the work that you're doing, which is of course noble. You need to have that vision, but before you do that, please remember that the field that we are working in, the social development sector, it's very complex and nuanced, and you need to spend enough time to first understand the intricacies of what the sector is all about, right? We are all very familiar with the context of a classroom, but if you go deeper and you realize what really goes on, to really create a strong high quality classroom, there are so many different factors that that influence it, right? And then what goes on within the classroom, is the teacher well equipped to take care of so many children who come from different backgrounds with a different mindset, different mentality? And then you have parental expectation also to work upon. You realize that it's not as simple as it looks from the outside. It has several complexities, several layers before you can ensure that education is being imparted of a certain quality, right? So this requires deep work. It requires you to observe carefully. It requires you to get various perspectives from various people who have walked the path before you, right? And most importantly, it means that you have to form your own independent opinion about whatever that you're going to work on. All of this requires what I call a scale deep approach, right? That you have to go deeper, understand all of this. Once you have that, then you can scale wide. Then you know what it really takes to go from place A to place B to C to D, right? So you know what it really takes before you can really bring in quality along with the scale. And in our country, scale is an imperative, right? We are not talking about one small country in Europe or Africa. We are talking about a country which has the most number of people in the world, and therefore, of course, the challenges that we grapple with are also multiplied manifold. So do have the ambition of working at scale, but before you do that, make sure that you go deep.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much for asking it, just explaining it so beautifully.
Yes, your words are really expanding and something we can actually learn from. So, so you have spent a significant part of your career life working in social sector. So over the years, how has your understanding of CSR evolved?
Yeah, that's another very good question. So the understanding of corporate social responsibility, or CSR, of course, when I walked into the sector, I had zero understanding of the sector, how it works, etc. But back then, I could see that there are several companies who are willingly giving a part of their profits to a social cause, right? And we've had in our country a tradition of large companies or business houses like the Tatas or the Mahindras that I belong to now, and several other companies contributing to the society, right? And I think it's very, very important to understand that a company that operates in any country is not isolated from the community. It is part of the community that where it is. So and at the end of the day, it is everybody's responsibility to make sure that those in the community who are not as fortunate, who are less privileged, and where the deficits are more significant, I think it is a common responsibility of the government, of the industry, of those who are higher up the privilege ladder, to make sure that the gap between the haves and the have-nots does not keep widening, right? So the thought of corporate social responsibility actually emanates from there, that companies have a responsibility to give back to the communities, right? Now, it's very interesting that India is the only country in the world, or significant country, to have made corporate social responsibility into a law. I think you're aware that companies in India of a certain size are expected to contribute 2% of their profits before taxes towards social responsibility, right? Now, ideally, my view is that this should not have come as a mandate from the government. In an ideal scenario, most companies should have realized that they have a reason, they owe it to the community, and therefore it is their responsibility to do the right things to support sections of the community that need that support, right? But that was not happening in our country, and that is where I think the government had to take this monumental decision of getting companies to contribute towards social responsibility. It's been a little over 10 years since this became a law, and I've seen a lot of positive changes happen in these 10 years, because initially companies were still sort of waiting and watching as to see how this unfolds. But now, and especially after COVID, I would say that COVID in many ways was a turning point for a lot of people to realize the gravity of what a country like India deals with when it comes to adversity, right? And it was around that time that the government also brought out an amendment to the law in the year 2021, which made the questions around CSR more sharper. It brought more clarity as to what can and cannot be done. And also the government started asking the right questions to companies in terms of, what are you doing for corporate social responsibility? So I've seen all of that happen, and I'm quite positive. Currently, the total amount which is being spent on corporate social responsibility is already touching about 35,000 crores, which is not a small amount, by any means. But of course, if you look at it in the light of the fact that what the government is spending on social development in India, it is just about 1%. Right? So how do you take this 1% to make sure that it can have a significant impact on the development narrative is a key challenge for people who are working in the CSR space, for all professionals who are working in the development sector. For them, the real interesting challenge is to see how do you make the most out of the limited capital that you have to make a much larger impact.
Sure, sir. So, sir, how does company move from creating CSR as compliance to creating a actually meaningful and measurable social impact?
Right. Yes, we hear the word compliance many times in the context of CSR. Sometimes I joke that CSR is actually compliant social responsibility. But we understand that compliance is essential. It is important for there being a certain framework which you have to adhere to, which you have to operate. The problem comes when sometimes companies tend to place the compliance before the impact or the real work that needs to be done. I think that's a mistake. The key thing which even the government expects from you, and which is actually, if you think about it, a very obvious thing as well, is to make sure that you've got your act right when it comes to actually creating impact from the money that you are spending on CSR. And that again requires either working with the right kind of NGOs that are working close to the ground, or building your own muscle to make sure that you are able to work closely with organizations or directly with the communities to make that impact. It is as much a science as an art. You need to make sure that you have the right kind of frameworks, tools, resources, which can create that impact. You need to have the right plan in place. Like everything, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So you have to plan well. You need to choose where you will be working for, because there is always a tendency to sometimes try and do everything. But we know that no organization by itself can really do everything or solve all the problems. So you have to choose which area do you want to work on. Do you want to work in education or livelihoods or healthcare or climate change or whatever? And even that you may have to choose further, because if you look at education, for example, the challenges of education at an early childhood or primary level are quite different from what they are at the higher education level, and quite different from what they are if you look at skill development or vocational training, which would fall under the livelihood bucket. So it's important to be very focused, because as I just said earlier, it's a very complex field to work in, right? So you have to have that very clear focus, and have all the frameworks in place by which you can actually not just create impact but also measure it, right? And once you do all of these, of course, compliance, as we said earlier, is imperative. You need to have a very solid understanding of what the compliance requirements are. And if you are working as a professional in the sector, you have to choose what is your area of interest and specialty. And we definitely need many more professionals working in the sector who are conversant with the intricacies of compliance. But of course, the large need is and will always remain of those people who really understand the themes, and what are the processes where you can really make solid impact. So I hope that answers your question, Tanvi.
Yes, of course, sir. So, sir, you have implemented lots of different projects across India, about more than 20 cities in India. So, what regional disparities have you observed when it comes to education, skill development, and employment?
So what major disparities you are asking?
Yes, what regional disparities you have observed across
Regional
India?
disparities.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, regional disparities in our country. Sometimes it's said that India is not one but many countries, right? And if you travel across the country, you realize why this is being said. As I mentioned earlier, I come from Patna. I was born and brought up in Bihar, which, as we know, has kind of lagged behind when it comes to development indicators. But as a child, of course, my worldview was based on what I had seen in Bihar. But then, as I grew up and saw other parts of the country, I realized that there is clearly like a hierarchy in terms of certain states which are more developed and advanced. There was also a very clear north-south divide which was visible in terms of development and socio-economic indicators, and particularly in education. I also realized that certain states are lagging severely behind. not in terms of intent, not in terms of the need for education or that, but basically because of several factors, historical reasons, lack of resources being available to to serve the kind of population that you have, and certain states having made the right calls at the right time. As you know, education is both a central as well as a state mandate. So it's part of the concurrent part of it. So there are certain states which have managed to take the right call in terms of what needs to be done to fix certain gaps which are there, and these states have progressed more than the others. The one lament that I've always had is that we don't learn often from each other. So what's happening in one organization often remains just within that organization, and similarly what's happening in one state sometimes remains just within that state. So there is a need for a far more collaborative environment and ecosystem. Of course, now I am seeing more of sharing and learning, cross learning happening. But earlier, if I were to go back about 15, 20 years ago, there just wasn't that kind of an environment prevailing where people were willing to share and learn from each other. And I think that is one of the reasons which has increased the disparity. We know that as technology is taking over more and more, becoming more and more central to our lives, it is also in some cases widening the divide because access to technology is different, for different people. We realized during COVID, for example, that just by giving a smartphone to a poor home does not help in facilitating e-learning. There are other issues about bandwidth, data, a lot of these things. And these are very real issues if you think about it, right? So many things that you and I may sort of take for granted in terms of resources that are available to us are not the same when you go down the pyramid, and right at the bottom of the pyramid things are very, very, very different.
Of course, sir. Thank you so much.
Yes. So, sir, in recent years, we have also seen government becoming much more active in shaping education and skill development. Like we have seen the new initiatives on digital platforms as well. So, from your experience, what role can organizations like Tech Mahindra Foundation can play in strengthening these efforts and making them more impactful?
Right. Thanks, Palak, for that question. So yes, I think organizations like Tech Mahindra Foundation and many others which are working in this sector, I think they have a very, very significant role to play in supporting what the government is doing. See, the government's mandate is to serve the entire country, a country which has 1.5 billion people, right? And therefore, a lot of government systems are structured towards delivering at large scale, right? If you just take the case of Delhi, for example, we work closely with the Municipal Corporation of Delhi, which has as many as 1,500 primary schools. Now think about your own one school and the kind of complexities that there were in just running one school. Now multiply that by 1,500 times, right? That is what just in the city of Delhi, the municipal corporation is doing. And if you add to it, the Delhi government schools, there are another about 3,000 odd schools if you include private. So it's a very, very, very large systems that we're talking about, right? Now, in order to run these large systems, you need a lot of structured processes, and therefore there is often not enough room for experimentation and innovation. I think this is where the private sector, which is working in development, like a Tech Mahindra Foundation, really comes in. I think the key role that we have is to experiment and create certain replicable models, whether we are working in education or employability, right? You have the opportunity to create replicable models which you operate initially at a smaller level, and then you should be willing to pass it on to others who want to do it, including the government. And now we are seeing several examples, especially in the case of Tech Mahindra Foundation. I've been associated with the creation of our skill development program, or the SMART program as we call it. SMART is an acronym for Skills for Market Training, and it was born out of the observation that there is a very large number of youngsters who are completing school in our country, but despite having been in school for 12 years, their employability skills are pretty low. So their ability to get into entry level jobs in our cities and perform, so there was a gap there, right? So which is what we did by setting up the SMART program, which is essentially a program that provides a gateway for these youngsters to get into entry level jobs in the formal sector. When we started this, we were very clear that we would not want to work at a very large scale. We would want to keep it limited, which is where we are now. We are, approximately about 20,000 students are being trained through our centers and academies every year, which, if you think about it from a national context, is a very small number. But we are content doing that because if we are able to do this successfully and are able to do this in a way where we are bringing in incremental changes all the time, where we are improving the quality, where we are bringing in technology at the right time, where we are bringing in experimentation which leads to better results, right? And we are documenting all of this, then this becomes a method by which we can serve the larger ecosystem of skilling millions and millions of youth who are there in our country. So that is precisely the role that an organization like Tech Mahindra Foundation can play by innovating and experimenting and creating replicable models in whichever theme that we are working in, which can then be adopted by others to do work at a larger scale.
Okay, sir. So the way you mentioned about innovation about a Tech Mahindra Foundation, so I want to also dive deeper into the Union Budget 2026-27 of India. Like it also talked a bit about rise of creator and digital content economy. So, sir, I was wondering, do you feel that our education system is evolving fast enough to prepare students for these kind of emerging careers? Like it's just a decade that they have started even arriving now. So, what do you think about that, sir?
Well, traditionally, if you look at the education system, not just in India, but across the globe, it is often being commented that the education system is one of the slowest to change in any country, right? Even if you look at our country, we know that in many schools, the way that education is being dispensed to children is exactly the same how it was maybe 20, 25 years ago, right? So from that perspective, I think the change that is happening in the ecosystem outside is faster than what the education system can really keep pace with. But having said that, yes, of late I'm seeing how there is a very genuine, honest intent from all quarters to make sure that we are able to catch up. The education system is able to catch up with the changes that are happening, in the ecosystem. Coming in of technology is, of course, very, very significant in this regard. But if you ask me honestly, we are still learning the ropes as to how best to use technology in a way where the learning outcomes are not diluted. Because at the end of the day, what is the purpose of education? It is not just to impart learning, but it is also to, probably more importantly, to shape personalities, individuals who can really contribute to the society in a larger way, right? So there is a lot that goes into an education system. You asked me about whether the education system is now geared up to the challenges of the new economy, all the shifts that are happening. And as I said earlier, while the education system across the globe is generally slow to move, we know that a lot of changes haven't happened anywhere in the world when it comes to bringing in the right kind of inputs. The corporate world, for example, has adopted to technology much faster, and are not far to seek. But I do see changes now happening. As I said, there is a lot of positive intent in terms of wanting to bring in the right kind of technology to make the necessary changes which are required. It's slow progress. I think we are still learning as to what works well with digital content and what does not. I think COVID was a time where, it kind of, it became clear to us what works using technology and what does not. For example, in the English learning program that we did for young adults, when COVID happened, we had to, we were compelled to make it online, but we could immediately see interest levels and learning levels drop, in this. But some more technical things that can be taught in shorter modules worked well, right? So COVID taught us what works well and what does not. I think we are still getting that right. And what we have done at Tech Mahindra Foundation, I can share, is that based on our experience, we've come out with a number of short duration courses on very specific topics, such as cybersecurity, such as digital learning for teachers, mental well-being for teachers, and one very important, which I think you could look on our website. It's called Gender Ed. It's basically on the topic of gender, which we realize that there is a need for a lot of people, even general people, to really grasp the true meaning of gender, right? We keep on talking about gender equality, but what does that really mean, right? Is something which we've tried to put in a digital learning course, which is available on our website.
Yes, sir. So, sir, as students, we are often told that education is the key up to opportunity. Yet, many young people feel uncertain about their future as they prepare to enter the professional world. So, from your experience, where do you think this gap between education and real opportunities begins, and what challenges do young people usually face during this transition?
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who has who's almost about 55 years of age, I think to answer for youngsters is a difficult one. But I do understand that the challenges that you guys face as youngsters at that age, where there is far more uncertainty. There are far more complexities in terms of how the future is going to be like. I can completely empathize that there are several questions, several doubts that you may have, because whatever that you are learning today within the education system that we currently have, some of it may not even be relevant even 5-10 years down the line. So I do completely empathize with that. But I think one of the things which is very, very clear to me is that there are certain aspects of learning, and a lot of these go beyond books and what just subject knowledge teaches us. A lot of aspects of our learning are such which are always going to be relevant, which are always going to be useful, and which are always going to help you stay ahead in the race. And these are what you need to really focus on. In my own experience, for example, I think a strong sense of curiosity about about the world around me, how things work, what it really takes to work with others. How do you a strong curiosity about the psychology of people. I mean, these are traits which have really helped me in my journey of so many years, right? And a lot of this comes not just from what's there in the textbooks or in the subject knowledge that's taught in our schools and colleges, but it comes out from having a lot of humility about curiosity, about being very open to the idea that, hey, you don't know, there are so many things which we don't know, and it's okay, right? And that gives you this trait that would want you to know more, to always question, to always ask the right questions. So I think that is a trait which is very important. I've seen youngsters sometimes begin to believe that I know everything, or you know nothing, right? I think that's very, very wrong, because it has to be a continuous progression of your own learning, in so many ways. Then I think the time tested attributes um, uh, of working in teams, for example, of uh, being able to know yourself very well. Like I said earlier, for me in my own journey, connecting what I want to do with who I really am was really, really important in terms of answering the quest for my life. Now that is something which you would not normally learn in schools, right? It is something which requires you to do a lot of self discovery, a lot of self questioning, and coming up with certain answers that you yourself are very convinced about, right? I sometimes advise youngsters that you have to first um, know yourself and then be yourself, right? When we are at that age that you are, sometimes our world is very driven by the outside in approach, right? How others look at us. But it's important for you to go within and really know who you are, and then be that person. Don't try to be somebody who you are not, right? We can't be that. So I think if you just follow that, a lot of it is going to get sorted.
Sure, sir. Your words were really inspiring. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are, Tanvi.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, sir, do you think education today should primarily focus on preparing young people for employment, or should it place equal importance to helping helping them becoming a better person in life? For example, socially aware person and responsible at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. See, I've always believed that education is preparation for life. It is not preparation for work. Okay, we often talk of work-life balance, but if you think about it, work is a part of life, right? You can't take work away from your life. It's part of us. And education is meant to prepare you for life, right? So, of course, work is a part of it, employability is a part of it, but there is so much more to it, right? It has to help you understand, how, uh, how the wheels of life really work, and how do you make sure that you can work with others, like I just said, the social skills that are required, the emotional ability that is required to navigate tough times, right? I think it is important that in our curriculum, in our schools and colleges, these aspects are introduced and ingrained amongst youngsters, as much as we try to ingrain so many other topics like Newton's laws and calculus and stuff like that. I think the change is best described as saying that, how do you bring together theory and practice in the same place. I think the main challenge that we have is that the entire education system tends to be very theoretical, whereas life, as we know, is very practical, right? So in some ways, our education institutions have to mirror life as closely as possible. And we have seen that certain institutions which have managed to do so have flourished over time, have done better, as compared to those which are just theoretical. Yes, I know that, the imperative of passing exams, board exams or later on, continues to be a very important factor. But we also know that, it's really not all that important. If I go back and look at how my classmates, after so many years, how they're doing, you will be, it's not, you can't really find a clear correlation between, what marks were scored and how people are really doing, right? Which means that there is a lot more that there is to it. And we have to look beyond those aspects. And clearly, education has to be towards solving for life and not just solving for work.
Sure, sir. Thank you for your words.
And sir, I want to really know that what advice would you give to students who want to build a career that combines business success and social impact?
Yeah, I mean, I've already shared some of my thoughts in that regard, Palak. I think the know yourself and be yourself framework is important in any kind of field. Also, like I've written also in my if you go on my LinkedIn, there is something called 20 years, 20 insights that I wrote about 5 years ago, which is from my journey in the sector. And in there, I've said that um, the social sector is actually an artificial construct. I think even if you are doing the most profitable business, if you have the right attitude of giving back to the society, of serving those who are not as fortunate as you are doing your job well. So it's never this or that, right? You can combine both. You can combine a strong sense of earning money and being ambitious about it, but at the same time being very conscious that there are certain factors which have led you to that position of privilege, which many others don't have, right? And there it becomes a moral responsibility, for us to make sure that we are supporting, giving back, in meaningful ways to do so. So for everybody, and while some of you may want to pursue a career only in the social development sector, which is great because the sector requires many bright young professionals. But even if you are choosing a track which is more sort of traditional in terms of working the corporate journey, or being in the for-profit world, even then you can contribute very meaningfully to social development.
Okay, sir. Sir, your answer make me really curious to ask that when you reflect to your journey so far, what moments or experience you have that gave you strongest sense that your work has really made a real difference?
I think that sense comes each time that I visit the field, any of our projects where I meet with individuals who express some gratitude, and who I can see have benefited because of some of the programs that I have been instrumental in giving shape to. For example, the SMART program, or the Skills for Market Training program that I just mentioned, which is now one of the longest running skill development program in India. Each time that I visit any of our smart centers or smart academies, and I see hundreds of young people who come from difficult circumstances, difficult backgrounds, but are now geared to take on the challenges of the world of work. That gives me a lot of satisfaction, interacting with them, seeing how we are in a small way, being playing a role in helping and improving lives. You're on mute, Palak.
Sir, we are already running short of time, but I want to ask you a question really very quickly that what advice would you give to your younger self?
What advice would I give to my younger self? Probably I'll say to not be as idealistic. I was as a 20-25 year old, I think, very idealistic. Sometimes that idealism actually comes in the way of you really being able to achieve what you want to. So having that balance between idealism and pragmatism is something which is very important. So let me just conclude by saying that this is the advice that I would want to give to youngsters, that you have to be balanced about polarities, about the polarity between being idealistic and being pragmatist. You have to be balanced. In polarity between being emotional and rational, you have to be balanced, right? So in all of these
Okay.
aspects, that would be the advice I'll give to my younger self.
Okay, sir. So thank you for sharing your time and experience with us today, sir. The kind of work you have done truly takes a lot of commitment, and as students, we feel that we have learned a deal just by listening to your journey and your perspectives today. So, sir, we are really grateful for this opportunity and hope we get more chances like this to learn from people like you. And on behalf of WIB Miranda House, thank you for being here with us. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Palak and Tanvi, and it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for your questions.